Well, the president and the rest of us watching closely the action in these 4 states, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, and California. These key matchups taking the temperature of how voters may lean going into next year's 2026 midterm election. So Democrats hope what happens tonight will be a referendum on the first months of the Trump presidency. In New York City's mayoral race, President Trump has, as Aaron just mentioned, thrown his support behind a former foe, and that's Andrew Cuomo. He wants Cuomo to beat Democrat socialist Zoran Mamdani. Now, Cuomo runs as an independent this time around with Republican Curtis Sliwa. He's still in it to win it, despite a lot of calls that he drop out to try to help Cuomo's chances against Zoran Mamdani. Now, Democrats in New Jersey, they look to see if voters will help them stay in the governor's mansion. The face-off right here, these are the candidates going head-to-head. It's between Representative Mikey Sherrill and former GOP State Representative Jack Ciattarelli, making his 3rd bid for the top spot, by the way. Virginia voters will make history by electing the Commonwealth's first female governor. There's the candidates right there. So Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears not getting, as Aaron just reported, a formal endorsement by President Trump. That's in that head-to-head with former Democratic Representative Abigail Spanberger. Now, on the ballot out west, let's talk about this one. California's answer to Texas Republicans redrawing their congressional maps to try to pick up more Republican seats in Congress for the midterms. Well, enter California's Proposition 50, spurred on by California Governor Gavin Newsom. It asks voters to greenlight a redraw for blue candidates, potentially giving Democrats 5 more seats in Congress, hailing from the state of California. Here's what some voters across the country are saying about what's at stake in all of these races.
It doesn't matter if it's national or local. Every decision that these politicians make affects at some point. It trickles down to your own home.
I think that we have a federal government that's overstepping, not following the Constitution, and we as New Yorkers, as one of the biggest and greatest cities in the world, need to stand for what's right and what real American ideals are.
Issues in my mind really are the survival of democracy. We want to be in a country where everyone has the right to participate in government.
CBS News team coverage continues in Washington. CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall on the ground in Virginia. CBS News reporter Taurean Small at a polling center in New Jersey. CBS News reporter Katrina Kaufman. But we begin in New York City with CBS News national correspondent Lilia Luciano. So, Lilia, my friend, President Trump rallying support for Andrew Cuomo. He's not been a fan historically of Cuomo in the past. Tell us why.
And that's something that President Trump said in that interview with Norah O'Donnell for 60 Minutes. He said, look, we don't see eye to eye. I have not been aligned with him. But he says that he would rather pick a quote unquote bad Democrat than a quote unquote communist, that referring to Mamdani. That is the picture that we have heard the Cuomo campaign stressing and putting out there via social media. We know that the Mamdani campaign has been very much geared towards younger voters with a lot of memes and TikToks and things like that. The Cuomo campaign, though more appealing to centrists and conservatives, has really tried to stress the social or socialist Democrat part, or calling him a socialist. We have heard of voters here today who are concerned about Mamdani's policies. We haven't heard much enthusiasm about Andrew Cuomo. It seems like many of the voters we've talked to here in Manhattan and Lincoln Center are either on the fence or said, I didn't vote for Cuomo, I voted against Mamdani. And a lot of the concerns or the fears were around those same issues, both his politics or maybe his pro-Palestinian message. We just heard from a Jewish voter who felt that Mamdani does not like New York Jews or wouldn't represent them, and so she is more aligned with Cuomo, even though she is concerned about the past accusations of sexual harassment. We have not met any Curtis Sliwa voters yet, but of course I'm not asking everybody who comes in and out. But the enthusiasm has either been a great deal of enthusiasm for Mamdani, including people who've walked around here, read, and said Mamdani's going to win, and then they were countered by voices who said no, Cuomo, or just anti-Mamdani voices. It's either very enthusiastic or, I'm voting against him and what he represents.
Capturing the headlines and the conversation, covering it all, Lilia Luciano. Thank you so much, friend. Now let's go to Taurean Small, live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Taurean, what are you hearing from voters in that governor's race?
Yeah, Reed. So far, we've heard quite a few people say how just much of an exciting time this is to be a voter. We've talked to precinct captains, poll workers who said that they're seeing turnout like they haven't seen in an off-presidential year. In fact, this one opened around 6 a.m. It's one of the largest in Fredericksburg, and so far they're seeing a constant stream of people flowing in and out, and partially because of the races that are on the line here. The first female governor will be decided in this race. We have Abigail Spanberger up against current Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. Both have quite a few challenges in front of them. Earl Sears looking at no endorsement from President Donald Trump. He held a teletown hall yesterday with Governor Glenn Youngkin, where he did not name drop her at all, and it's been pretty consistent since the time she jumped in this race. For Spanberger, she's been looking to distance herself from the Democrat running for Attorney General out here because of a text messaging scandal that surfaced just a few weeks ago. She's been distancing herself from those comments, saying that she disavowed them, but hasn't called for him to drop out of the race. We'll see whether or not that would play a factor in her or the Democrats' success this evening. But so far, we talked to quite a few Democrats who said they were voting blue up and down the ticket. Here, it's quite a mixed crowd, as we've seen folks saying so far that they're just happy to be here and voting again in an off-presidential election year. Reed.
Taurean Small with voters in Virginia. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so CBS News reporter Katrina Kaufman continues team coverage live with us from New Jersey. So, Katrina, this race is also closely watched nationally. Why?
Reed, as you were saying before, this is a first test on how President Trump is doing. And Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate for governor here, has made him a central part of her campaign. She has both been campaigning on local issues, but in many ways against President Trump. Now, Trump has endorsed her opponent, Republican Jack Ciattarelli. He has not, though, appeared in the state to campaign for him in person, something that one of the voters I spoke with at a Sherrill rally noted the other day. She said Trump has a property here. He could come sleep in his own home, but he has not come to New Jersey, perhaps because he's not that popular in the state right now, Reed. But what's also significant is that in the last presidential election in 2024, Republicans did make significant gains. It was the closest a Republican has come to winning the state since 1992. The question is, will they maintain those with this governor's race? Sherrill had been farther ahead of Ciattarelli leading up to this race. It's now viewed as a much closer, very high stakes race. Over the weekend, I was at a rally where former President Barack Obama came to campaign for her, and he told that crowd that the entire nation is watching and that this would set an example for the whole country. The other thing that's worth noting about today is that earlier this morning, bomb threats were emailed out regarding a number of polling places across the state. Now, officials have deemed those to be hoaxes, but they were very disruptive. Some polling places had to be moved, some had to be closed down, others have reopened. And the candidates both made statements about this, Reed. Ciattarelli saying that there's no place in politics for nonsense like this. And what Mikey Sherrill said is that these threats are a clear attempt to undermine our democratic system and intimidate New Jerseyans from coming out to vote. She told them not to be deterred. Now, I was also speaking with our elections law expert, David Becker, earlier, and he wanted to remind people that during the 2024 election, there were also bomb threat hoaxes that were called in a number of states. Those turned out to be from foreign adversaries who were trying to be disruptive in the election. Now, we don't yet know the source of these, though.
Katrina Kaufman watching it all. Thank you so much. So now we turn to CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall live in our nation's capital. So Hunter, you're watching California's answer to that Texas redistricting push. Governor Newsom said Texas poked the bear and the bear is poking back. Walk us through the California ballot initiative, will you?
California serves as essentially, this is Democrats' big effort to try and counter what Republicans started on redistricting. Now in Texas, this is a GOP-held state. Republicans at President Donald Trump's urging were redrawing that state's congressional maps to take 5 Democratic-held districts, make them more favorable to Republicans. California answered that by essentially, they've put on the ballot a constitutional amendment. The impact of this would be the Democrats in the state legislature would be able to redraw California's maps, take 5 GOP-held congressional seats and make them more favorable to Democrats, as well as helping essentially shore up some Democratic seats in the state that were very close in the 2024 election. Now, the idea is by countering what Republicans are doing in Texas, California will be able to essentially say, okay, redistricting-wise, Democrats aren't even playing field. But what we've seen actually is several Republican states have now redistricted as well, taken a Democratic-held seat, made it more favorable to Republicans. But really, the subtext we're seeing here is California Governor Gavin Newsom. He's a potential 2028 presidential candidate, and he took what was a really dicey political idea, taking a ballot measure on short notice to the voters, even of a blue state. And so far, we've been seeing signs that there's a lot of success for Democrats here. And the Republicans are a bit beaten down about whether or not they'll be able to vote down this ballot measure today.
Well, and Governor Gavin Newsom, in his sit-down with CBS News, said that he was not ruling out the potential for a presidential run. Could be fascinating times where that's concerned. Hunter, good to talk to you there in Washington, D.C. Well, CBS News 24/7 is your stop for nonstop updates on the races that matter to you. So make sure to join our streaming special coverage that begins on the Takeout at 5 p.m. Eastern.